Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today I'm watching Britain is a Dump by Brit Monkey. This video is almost 1.5 hours long, so we're in for a long one. A link to the original video will be down in the description below. Why is that part blurred?
Have you noticed how empty everywhere is these days?
Yeah, kind of.
Britain is quickly becoming a nation of nothing. A recent Cambridge University report finds the availability of parks, cinemas, train stations, public transport, GP practices, hospitals, mental health care, police stations, banks, cash machines, post offices, education facilities, theatres, swimming pools, museums, shopping centres,
Okay, just say etc.
gyms have
No
declined
need to mention
across
everything.
almost all English areas since 2014. Under the Conservatives, funding for local government has been cut by over half since 2010.
Wow.
With such stringy finances, councils have had to be very frugal with their limited budget, selling off billions worth of public assets just to make ends meet, and raising council tax higher and higher to pay for worse and worse services.
I did not
Even
know
then,
just how bad the
many
situation
councils
was
are
in
going
Britain.
into debt just providing basic functions. This is part of a wider economic policy pursued by the Conservatives over the past 14 years, one that was intended to bring down government debt. Cuts to education to the tune of £10 billion,
I wonder how much this was affected by Brexit.
taking 14% from the most deprived schools, £5,000 less per pupil, youth services down by a third, environment
Jesus
down
Christ.
20%, housing down by a half, and infrastructure down 55%, road repairs down 40%, 600 million slashed from yearly cultural spending. That probably
who
doesn't
cares
sound
about that
like
one?
much, but 10 years down the line, the last 5 UK Christmas #1s have been a series of novelty songs about sausage rolls. In this frenzy of balancing budgets, the Tories
Excuse me?
seemingly forgot that there were people on the other side of those spreadsheets, and soon society began to quite literally collapse in on itself. St Mary's Hospital in London has rotting floors, flooding, collapsing ceilings, and sewage spilling out of the drains onto the outpatient ward. But
I've
St.
never heard
Mary's
about
Hospital
any of this.
doesn't qualify for urgent investment to repair these issues,
That's
because
a
there
hospital.
are at least 5 other hospitals in worse condition, and there isn't enough
my
money to repair
God.
them all. One hospital in Cambridge is so dilapidated that it is unsafe to treat overweight patients on the upper floors, because the structure could give way
It could
at
collapse.
any moment. There are schools that are only avoiding bankruptcy because every time the ceiling collapses, they get an apology payment from the company that was contracted to build the school. Some areas were exempt from budget cuts, like benefit payments, for example. So the goal became to get as many people
This is
off
terrible.
benefits as possible. And some of the ways they tried to do this are downright cruel. People on housing benefits who have a spare bedroom in their house could be forced to pay a penalty. This would encourage them to move to a smaller house,
What?
thus
Excuse
reducing
me?
the overall amount of benefits that need to be paid. But some people need
Holy
a spare
crap.
bedroom in their house to store medical equipment, because 2/3 of the penalty payers
Well, there should be
were
like an
disabled.
exception for that.
This was a tax on low-income disabled people, and hundreds
my
of thousands
God.
fell into poverty as a result. How much did this policy save? After
Nothing.
2 years, 390 million. Not even 1 day
That's
of
not
health
much.
service funding. Estimates for the number of people killed by strict welfare policies run into the tens of thousands. The Conservatives have created one of the most frugal governments in the developed world, and
Holy
contributed
crap.
to the longest and deepest period of
How is it that I have never heard about any of this? Like, I see no news outlets talking about this. It's like everyone's just ignoring it. How could the situation have gotten so bad?
wage losses since the Napoleonic Wars. The last 14 years of Conservative government have been worse for your finances than the Great Depression. In a
Wow.
modern society, when the
That's
government
impressive.
ceases to work, everything
That is
ceases
honestly
to work.
impressive
The
to
British
That's
economy
hard
has
to
seen
achieve.
no growth in the past 15 years. The median salary in Britain hasn't changed in over 15 years. If we had maintained the pace of wage growth we had before 2008, we would have, on average, about £11,000 more pounds in disposable income each.
Holy
the average
crap.
family in Poland and Slovenia is set to be better off than the average...
Yeah, that's one thing I was gonna say. Here in Poland, we're supposed to be better off than the British soon. Now I understand exactly why. It's because Britain's just going downwards instead of up.
British family by the end of the decade. People who live in the former East Germany, who spent 44 years under a communist dictatorship, are now richer than the UK average.
I mean, yeah, same thing with Poland. We were under Soviet occupation, and now we're supposed to be richer than the British? How is that even possible? It shouldn't be. It should be impossible.
It wasn't always like this. Cast your mind back to 2007. I was in year 3 and spending all my allowance on Club Penguin. Things were far from perfect, but materially, we were all better off. Huge strides had been made in reducing child poverty. Crime had been on a downward trend since 1995, and the health service was in such good shape
Things are going
that people
great.
complained the waiting list to see a doctor was too short.
If
I disagree.
and
There's no
ask,
way people
say,
complained
on the
about
Monday
that.
for an appointment on the Wednesday, no, you have to ring back Wednesday morning. That's right.
Well, sorry, yeah, but surely they're not saying to you that you have to have it quicker than you wanted. Well,
Per capita, Britain was one of the richest countries in the world, beaten only by a few tax havens and oil states. The average British person was richer than the average in the USA, France, Japan, Australia and Canada, but
That's
in
crazy,
14
honestly.
short years, we threw all of that away. The British economy has even performed worse than Russia, a nation crippled by sanctions, a costly war on its own doorstep, and where one in
Well, you can't really look at Russia's economy right now because it's all just a bit of a mess. You can't really use the Russians as a comparison right now.
5 people are alcoholics. I cannot stress how utterly over it is for the
Well, that's kind of true for a lot of Eastern Europe. A lot of people are alcoholics, especially older people, which makes sense because of the Soviet Union.
I cannot stress how utterly over it is for the UK. 1 in 3 children are in poverty. In places like Newcastle, it's as high as 41%.
1 in 3 in
20
London,
children
the
can't even
capital.
afford to sleep on a mattress. 800,000 people went to hospital for malnutrition last year, up 300% since 2013.
How is it... It baffles me how I've never heard about any of this.
In 2010, the charity Trussell Trust delivered 41,000 food packages to struggling families. In 2023, it was 3 million, an increase of 7,000%. Enemies of
God.
Britain, you should be doing victory laps, host a party, invite all of your friends. When the Conservatives arrived in office in 2010,
there's no
the
need to
Treasury under
fight the
Labour
British
had
when they
been running
destroy
a
themselves.
deficit of £150 billion a year trying to weather the 2008
Britain sounds more
global
and more like
financial
a
crisis.
third world country.
If another
Obviously,
big
it's
crisis
not
were
even
to
close
happen,
to being
like a
as
public
bad.
health emergency or a major
But it's getting
conflict,
there.
Britain wouldn't have the money to deal with it. So austerity measures were, as David Cameron called it, fixing the roof while the sun was shining. It has now been 14 years since the Conservatives took office, 9 years since they shook off the Liberal Democrats and governed alone without compromise. Yet the roof was never fixed. Things did not get
only
back
gotten
to
more
normal
broken.
when the deficit was under control. And when it did rain, it rained hard. Our crippled island stood no chance against the tumultuous 2020s. The Conservatives justified their budget cuts
COVID,
economically
war.
with a 6-page research paper called Growth in a Time of Debt, which suggested that too much debt would severely hamper economic growth and recovery from recessions. Needless to say, this paper was fraught with errors, including an Excel typo which threw off all the calculations and drastically overemphasized the results. Even the writers of the paper eventually said that the paper was wrong, and a revised version of the study revealed that austerity policies were much less
How can you make a typo in such an important document? That's something you should check 10 times over, if not more.
effective than first thought. But that doesn't matter to the Conservatives anymore. They stopped pursuing financial stability long ago and are now engaging in a nefarious social re-engineering program that specifically targets the poorest areas of the country. That sounds like some kind of left-wing conspiracy, but no, they openly admit to taking from the poor to give to the rich.
I managed to start changing the funding formulas.
That's great.
To make sure that areas like this are getting the funding that they deserve. Because we inherited a bunch of formulas from the Labour Party that shoved all the funding into deprived urban areas. Then that needed to be undone. I started the work of undoing that.
But is that the end?
Holy shit. How do you just admit that? I mean, at least he's not lying about it. At least he's being honest. Like, yeah, we're screwing you over. We're screwing you in the ass so that the other people can have it better. No, that's disgusting.
After all, we're only
10.81%
of the way through the runtime of this video. It turns out that many of our nation's problems are actually decades old, and when the Tories quite literally ripped up the social foundations of the nation, they brought all of them out into the open at the same time. A cacophony of catastrophes, aren't we lucky? If you live in Britain and you're around my age, you probably scarcely even remember living in a world outside of late trains, littered streets, shuttered shops and crumbling schools. My viewer base is mostly 18 to 30 year olds who for the first time in a century are more...
A lot of those people who are 18 to 24 are actually probably below 18. They're in the 13 to 17 category, but people lie about their age on YouTube to get access to everything. I mean, I'm pretty sure everyone does that. I did that. Everyone I know did that. None of us said that we were under the age of 18. Everyone always put above 18 on everything, because that way you had access to every feature of the application you were using. So a lot of those 18 to 24 are probably younger. Just saying.
18 to 30 year olds who for the first time in a century are more likely to be living with family than having their own home. You should be out enjoying to be living with family than having their own home. You should be out enjoying your 20s, throwing parties, having loads of sex, making a name for yourself. How is that possible if you're stuck in your childhood bedroom, still with your Mr. Men bedsheets from when you were a kid, subject to your nagging parents, the only other options giving away like half of your income on rent, or getting locked into a 35-year mortgage on the most boring house you've ever seen?
You just don't really have much of a choice. You have to live with your parents because you can't afford to move out. I'm almost 20. I'm only now finishing school, and I might keep going for another like 5 years. I'll be 25 maybe by the time I get out of school. Then I have to get a job, earn enough money to get a house. I'm probably going to be living with my parents till I'm 30 because there's just no other option.
That's not projection, just in case you thought it was. You probably didn't, but just in case that you did. Don't blame yourself. You're not a failure. Look around. We're all in the same boat. Nothing
it's too expensive.
Is new.
Everything
is at least
too
40
costly.
years old. Houses are so damn expensive these days. The average house price has increased 224% since 1990, far outstripping wages over the same time period. The problem is I'm
pretty sure it's like that across most countries.
By an unholy Frankenstein ghost of socialist Thatcherism.
What does that mean? No building, please. We're British.
In the 1930s, it was really cheap to build stuff. Interest rates were low, making it easy to borrow money and invest in new construction projects. You didn't need to ask permission to build. If you owned the land, you could build anything. The only rules were that the structure needed to be safe and well ventilated. Building was booming. In 1935 alone, 70,000 homes were built in London, and nearly 300,000 across the whole UK, giving rise to the classic suburbs still around today. Construction became 17% of the UK economy and accounted for a third of all economic growth in this period. A lot of people didn't like this. The socialists within the Labour Party didn't like that private capitalist developers were dictating the national housing policy.
Of course.
So when Labour ascended to power after the Second World War, they introduced this, the Town and Country Planning Act of 1947. From now on, you must ask for government permission to build anything, so that any and all construction would be in the interests of the public, not profits. Everything must be built with the approval of the local residents. The government, in theory being the representative of the local residents, could just give themselves planning permission, and for most of the post-war era, it was they who built most of the nation's infrastructure.
Of course it was.
Then, when the Thatcher government took power in 1979, they slashed the budget of national and local construction projects,
67%?
believing that the private market
Holy
would
crap.
simply pick up the slack. What they seemingly forgot to
Reality
do
is
was
not the
repeal
same.
the law preventing the private market from building anything. And what does a policy such as that look like several decades later? Under a plan drawn up by the Poplar Housing Association, 330 homes in Tower Hamlets would be demolished and replaced by 1,600 modern homes, with 600 being designated as low-income housing. There was also added space for retail and transport right next to Canary Wharf, where all the high-paying jobs are. That sounds like in the public interest to me, and the public agreed. The council said yes, the planning board said yes, even the residents said yes in a referendum.
So who said no?
That was 90% in favour with a 90% turnout. But London's City Council rejected it because some people, quantity unknown, said that the buildings would be too high. And so the story goes.
That's such bullshit.
Year upon year, up and down the country. Private developer wants to build, a small minority of local residents get up in arms about it, and the local council, not wanting to lose any voters, denies the planning permission, and the nation continues.
Why do people still listen to minorities? Just ignore them. They're a minority. They don't mean anything. You'll lose more votes by pissing off the majority, like they're doing right now.
Continues to stagnate. Just look at how old our buildings are compared to the rest of Europe. The majority of
Very
people
old.
live in houses built before 19...
Oh, whoa. What the heck happened to France and Germany? You know, the buildings being old in East Germany, as well as parts of Poland, makes sense because of the Soviets. But what the heck is with France? Also, what the heck happened to Italy? And just a lot of Germany, actually. Even the western side of Germany.
70. Last year, the estate agents Foxtons had nearly 100,000 applicants competing for over just 2,000 available properties. The waiting list for a council house in Brent is 14 years, with 20,000 people on the list. And as in all cases where supply is limited, those with deeper pockets always win.
If you ever do manage to escape that tier of the history classroom poster, you get locked into a 35-year mortgage, enslaved to a bank, giving away half their paycheck to a landlord who is oftentimes an actual lord, paying off a house that was built in 1925.
The streets of Strasbourg and Frankfurt, even Warsaw and Prague, are filled with boutiques and small businesses and cafes.
Yes, they are.
On British streets, you will find nothing except Greggs,
Seriously?
a W.H. Smith, or a betting shop if you're lucky.
It's just nothing?
Independent businesses are priced out. Entrepreneurialism in Britain today is mostly drop shipping and ticket scalping.
So it's just
This
dead.
is why we are thousands of pounds poorer than our German counterparts. We are the only country in Western Europe that is like this. Spain has built over 10 high-speed rail lines since 1992, most of them much longer than HS2. In fact, for €30, you can get a first-class ticket with a 2-course meal included with any journey over 2 hours.
Damn.
Why can't we have that? It's not a one-off novelty that gets featured in a Tom Scott video. It's a normal thing that normal countries have.
It's a normal thing
And we
across
don't have
almost
it.
all of Europe.
Britain's cities are more poorly served by public transport than those of...
Wow! It still surprises me that the UK is below Poland in most of the things that have been shown so far. Like, that is just crazy to me.
any other wealthy Western country, including the car-centric suburban hell of the United States.
They're even worse than the US?
Brescia in Italy, population 200,000,
That's impressive.
has a fully automated metro line built in 2013, with plans for 2 more. Leeds, population 500,000, is the largest city in Western Europe without a light rail or metro system. It may have something to do with how the bureaucratic inquiries required to construct a new tram station can cost more than the inquiry into the Iraq War. A small minority of local residents have the power to block any and all development, even if it's for the betterment of society, even if they benefit, like vetoing.
See, that makes no sense to me. If the vast majority of people says yes, you should go ahead. Who cares if there's a few old farts who don't want it? We're talking about the future here. So what if a few people don't like it? They can tell them to fuck off. They can move somewhere else if they don't like it.
Vital flood defences that could stop their homes from being destroyed because the defences would look kind of ugly.
Oh
House
my
building
god.
targets have never once been met.
Hold on a
being
second.
Benefit, like vetoing vital flood defences that could stop their homes from being destroyed.
Here in Poland, we recently, well, it's been like 3 months now, but we had a big flood. There was one place where a dam was supposed to be built to prevent that type of scenario. But the dam was not built because of a minority of people who said no. Can you guess who it was? Activists. And now thousands of people have lost their homes just in time for Christmas. Why? Because a few activists said that no, this is bad. So yeah, that's the same thing as is happening in Britain and everywhere else across Europe, because apparently activists matter more than the safety of the citizens.
Because the defences would look kind of ugly. House building targets have never once
Activists
been
are the
met
problem.
since they were introduced 23 years ago. Not under the Tories, not under Labour. So instead, the Tories just abolished the targets.
Which looks to me like turning off your smoke alarm just because you don't like the noise that it's making.
The houses that do get built are poor quality, cramped, ugly, and lagging behind our European neighbours. Are poor quality, cramped.
What is this? This thing only has 2 windows. 3 just have bricks in them. What the heck?
And lagging behind our European
This looks
neighbours.
horrible.
They have to comply with the silliest of regulations, such as absurdly small window sizes.
That's kind of small.
This regulation apparently exists because climate change might make people want to open their windows more so they can get some fresh air, and small children could fall out of them. Instead of making...
That's like all those toys and stuff that was banned because one kid choked on it, so they have to recall the entire thing. This sounds the exact same. Because it is the exact same, really. It's like how in the US, I think they can't have Kinder eggs because they have a toy in them. And kids like to choke on small things, like those toys. So the US just can't have Kinder eggs. This is so fucking stupid.
Windows smaller, why don't we just install air conditioning so people don't have to open their windows? Well, because air conditioning is more or less banned because it would use too much electricity.
Holy
Can't we just
crap.
make more electricity? Apparently not. Solar construction businesses have been waiting 15 years for permission to install solar farms
because one group in particular have been very vocal in their opposition to green energy. Have you guessed who it is yet?
Conservatives?
That's right, it's the Green Party.
2014,
Huh?
sorry, Regate Green Party opposes a solar farm that could have provided green energy to over 3,500.
What? How does the Green Party reject green energy? Isn't that the whole thing? What? Holy shit.
homes. 2018, Kent. The Green Party opposes the installation of a new solar farm in uninhabited marshland. 2020, Hastings. The Green Party opposes plans to build a 2 megawatt solar farm. 2021, Derbyshire. The Green Party opposes any and all solar farms in the entire county, with Councillor Frank Adlington saying, "Solar farms are not the future of Derbyshire's energy sector." He goes on to say that if...
On one hand, I can kind of understand this because it would be far better to just go nuclear, even though that poses risks, but it's still better than green energy. Green energy, solar panels, they have a lot of problems, but I'm not going to get into that because that's going to take way too long, and this video is already 1.5 hours long, so my reaction is probably going to be 2 hours long. But yeah, green energy, a lot of problems, especially with solar panels. Nuclear would be better, but to just deny everything, that actually sounds like a pretty good idea. This is fucking stupid.
the Green Party were in government, there would be greater investment in offshore wind power, hydropower, tidal,
my God.
geothermal and other renewable technologies.
If you're against green energy, you at least have to be pro-nuclear energy. Otherwise, what are you gonna go for?
Instead,
Mr. Adlington, Frank, I don't know if you've ever looked at a map of the county you represent, but it's landlocked. Second of all, you might want to check in with your fellow party members.
Because East Suffolk Council, which the Green Party controls, have blocked the expansion of more wind farms in the North Sea because they were alarmed by the current developer-led model. What a weird group of people. Climate change is an existential threat to humanity, but don't do anything about it if it means somebody would make a profit from the solution. Horror stories from bureaucratic Britain go on and on and on. 13 years to build an offshore wind farm.
The Green
£1
Party
billion
in Britain is way worse than any
rebuild
other
a
Green Party
roundabout
I've seen
in
so far.
Bedfordshire. Victorian-era telephone cables preventing the rollout of high-speed internet. £9 billion to rebuild a roundabout in Bedfordshire. Victorian-era telephone cables preventing the rollout of high-speed internet. £9 billion and 22 years to build a 3-mile tunnel under the River Thames. This tunnel has produced 359,000 pages of paperwork.
Why not just build a bridge over it? I'm pretty sure it would be less expensive, easier to make, it would take less time, less resources too. A bridge just sounds like a way better idea than a tunnel. Like, what's the point of this?
And not a single shovel of earth has been moved. Last year, India landed a probe on the moon for $75 million. We could have landed Britain on the moon 100 times for the cost of planning to build a 3-mile tunnel. And it's not just the big projects that get blocked with the rise.
Oh my god. This is ridiculous. Is anyone here British? If you are, leave in the comments down below. Does your government have any common sense and logic? Because so far it seems like it doesn't.
Of smartphones,
this is worse than my government.
British
Holy
red
crap.
telephone boxes have become public urinals and billboards for prostitutes. But when local entrepreneurs wanted to turn this Lambeth phone booth into a coffee kiosk, locals rejected the idea because it was, quote, out of character in a conservation area of historic interest.
Presumably, this would ruin the historical value of a giant mural of a girl in a bikini.
It could very well be.
I hate these people.
We never get good infrastructure ever again. A report by the Resolution Foundation suggests that in order to fix our decrepit infrastructure, we would need to double taxes to raise the funds necessary.
Double taxes?
Keep in mind that when this report was written, the Tories have raised the tax burden to the highest ever since World War II. So we'd have to double that just to get infrastructure up to the standard of our fellow Europeans.
Doubling taxes to the amount that they were at World War II? Just to be at the same level as the rest of Europe? Including Eastern Europe, who was under Soviet occupation and had to live with communism 4 to 5 decades? How is this physically possible? Holy crap.
So it would seem that the government can't really do this alone. We have to return to the
I sound like a broken record, but
1930s so that the
I'm just being surprised by every single thing in this.
It is safe and fit for human habitation.
I'm just more and more shocked with everything he mentions.
No permission required.
If you want to build a stadium in the Chilterns or something, that's when the neighbours should be consulted. You know what kind of place has rules like this?
Tokyo. And who'd want to live in a dense, overcrowded third world slum from hell like Tokyo? This is not Tokyo, this is a green screen.
But a strict planning system isn't the only sucker punch this act has had in store for British prosperity. The 1947 Act also introduced the concept of greenbelts. The land surrounding cities would be frozen in place, banned from being built on or altered in any way, even land that looks like this.
What is that?
Just 1% of greenbelt land could deliver 700,000 new homes. We reduced the size of the greenbelt by 10%, and that's 7 million new houses.
Nah, can't do that.
Just 10%. Greenbelt defenders like to say that it's there to stop cities sprawling outwards, give the city's working class a beautiful place to explore, and protect nature. Although none of these claims hold much water. We could double the size of
As usual, activists are the problem! Because they're fucking idiots! They're morons who don't even know what they're talking about.
Every UK city, and it would still only cover 12% of the island, leaving 88% free to be left to nature. The average city dweller visits the Greenbelt only once per year, and almost all Greenbelt land is privately owned. The only way you can enjoy it is by
so you can't
hopping
even
onto a
go
public
there.
footpath. With no other legal uses, this land is subject to intensive farming, which the UK National Ecosystem Assessment found is a net negative to the local environment. Empty fields are not protecting nature. The Peak District is nature. The Highlands are nature. This is not nature. This is not something worth protecting.
This is wasted space.
Basically, I hate Clement Attlee. But his government introduced the National Health Service, the pride of Britain, that in 2020 was voted by the public as the coolest thing to ever exist, beating out James Bond, space travel, and Obama.
Wow, so surely it must be good, right?
Sure. No. Who counted those votes? What is this?
In October 2020, during the second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic, revolutionary New York underground hip-hop artist MF Doom was checked into St. James's Hospital in Leeds. He had recently moved to Leeds from London, because many fans will be surprised to learn that just like Christian Bale in Champagne, Doom was actually British. Despite living in America almost all his life, a loophole in citizenship laws led to his deportation from the USA in 2012. Doom is one of the most influential hip-hop artists of all time, given the honour of your favourite rapper's favourite rapper. His storytelling is sublime. Vaudeville Villain, a personal favourite of mine, follows the exploits of a time-travelling drug dealer who gets trapped in New York's Upper West Side in 1993. Undoubtedly, one of the GOATs. At the time of his admittance, Doom was taking medication for high blood pressure, but NHS bureaucracy prevented medical staff from accessing records from the London hospital that had prescribed him the drugs. He had taken a
How can you deny a hospital access to medical records? The hospital is the one place that should have access to this. How can they be denied what? That makes no sense. Your hospital needs your medical records to know what they can do and what they can't do. How can they be denied this? He's gonna die.
A different medication to usual and was developing a severe reaction. Within just a few days, Daniel Dumoulin was dead at 49.
Like I said,
his wife alleges that overworked nurses couldn't check on his condition as often as required. This story is not well known, because fans of New York hip-hop and people interested in British healthcare policies are typically very separate groups.
Yeah.
But MF Doom was just one of the estimated 300 to 500 people who die every week due to delays in NHS treatment. That's 20,000 people a year.
And this is because, and I know it's kind of sinful to say this, but the NHS isn't very good at keeping people alive.
For 30 years, the UK has consistently had the lowest cancer survival rates of any developed nation. The NHS performs worse than average in the treatment of 8 of the 12 most common causes of death, including heart attacks and cancer. We are third worst in the developed world.
You're telling me the UK is worse with heart attacks than the US, the fast food capital of the world. Once again, very impressive. That would be hard to do. But somehow they've done it.
Illness. Infant mortality is 27% higher in Britain than the Western European average. Since 2010,
higher than Western Europe.
Doubled.
Okay.
More than a quarter of A&E patients wait more than 4 hours for help. The number of people waiting for NHS is up 200% since 2010, with 23,000 people waiting more than 2 years for treatment. 66% of the population are overweight, and half. One of the few things the UK ranks the highest in is healthcare equality. So at the very least, whether you're rich
everyone
or
gets
poor,
shit
white
healthcare.
or black, we're all equally dead of COVID-19. Not only are the outcomes terrible, the pay for those working in the sector is truly appalling.
The starting salaries for junior doctors in places like Australia, Canada, the United States and France can be up to double the £29,000 basic that junior doctors would earn here in the UK.
If pay had kept up with inflation, junior doctors would be earning £20,000 more per year. Other countries know this.
Oh.
Australia is now offering huge benefits for British medical workers to abandon the NHS and move down under.
But the UK is the main target, where this ad will air from Sunday.
And it's why Western Australia welcomes you to be part of WA Health. Financial incentives available. Apply
So
today.
the Australians are stealing from the British now.
And it's working. 1 in 7 doctors
That's
trained by
awesome.
the NHS have since
That's
moved
comedy.
to another country. Double as many as any other developed country. We are literally paying.
The UK, the British used to send prisoners to Australia to get rid of them. Now, the British people who are actually educated and good at their jobs are leaving to Australia on their own. That's fucking awesome.
To train other countries' doctors and nurses. The unions have done their best to fix the situation, but let's not pretend they're not partially at fault. In 2009, the British Medical
Definitely.
Association successfully lobbied the government to put a cap on the number of medical school places available to
That is
British
stupid.
students, because they thought that
That
fewer
is
doctors
dumb.
would lead to higher pay. And it
That's
worked
not how that
due to staff
works.
shortages.
Just because, yeah, you have less doctors, maybe you'll have slightly more pay. But that same doctor is gonna have way more hours, way more patients, he's not gonna be able to sleep properly, his quality of life is just going to go down, and he's probably gonna end up in the same hospital he works in.
Hospitals
Stupid.
have resorted to hiring freelance doctors to cover shifts, paying over £2,500 to hire one doctor for one afternoon. What can we do to fix all this? Nothing. It's pretty hard to improve a system that is literally already praised as a god.
Today, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh were among those to celebrate 75 years of the National Health Service. The Prime Minister and Leader of the Opposition read
They
Bible
celebrated
verses
this?
for an institution which has often been described as the UK's national religion.
And I saw the holy city, the New Jerusalem.
So whatever you're thinking, whatever crazy idea you come up with to fix the NHS, ain't happening. Because no matter what idea you come up with, the public and the media will accuse you of supporting the total abolition of the NHS, and that we will be only a few years away from being like Americans paying $50,000 for stitches, which makes any kind of meaningful reform politically impossible. None of these conspiracy
How are these people so brainwashed? This is insane.
theories ever come true. In fact, the King's Fund, a pro-NHS think tank, finds no evidence at all of creeping privatisation of the health service. Decentralising the
Yeah,
system.
but the media is gonna
Labour
say
have been
otherwise.
talking of giving away power.
And the people are
Perhaps
sheep.
The answer is making the NHS more local, for local people. Well, in 2003, Labour introduced foundation hospitals, giving NHS hospitals a degree of independence from the government. The British Medical Association, the Royal College of Nursing, and 130 backbench Labour MPs opposed the idea due to fears of privatisation, and The Guardian said it would effectively privatise NHS hospitals.
Why are they so against privatization? Like, holy crap! That would actually be a good thing, not bad.
Didn't. Contracting private companies to run medical facilities. This is what they do in Sweden to keep down costs, because around 40% of GPs in Sweden are run by private companies contracted by regional health authorities. In 2012, the coalition introduced the Health and Social Care Act, which, among other things, made it easier for private companies to be contracted to do NHS work. The BMA said it was an affront to the public service ethos that glues the NHS together. The BMA must unmask this reform agenda for what it really is: the final step in the privatisation of the service. It wasn't. Paying for GP appointments. Among countries with single-payer healthcare, Britain is actually in the minority of countries without any form of upfront costs. An appointment with your doctor in Norway will set you back about £20. In France, a more modest £6.50. In Ireland, the appointment is free, but a blood test is €30. Of course, if you are low income or elderly or chronically ill, it's free. If a similar system was done in the UK, it could raise a few £billion every year. But last year, when a former NHS boss proposed a £7 a day payment for hospital stays to ease pressure on NHS finances, the campaign group Keep Our NHS Public called it a harebrained idea and a zombie policy. I assume Norway didn't get the memo.
You know, at this point, I'm thinking, these people want to suffer. I'm assuming that the people who are against this, aka the ones with common sense and logic, have probably already left the country for someplace better. Because Britain is dying.
Give it more tax money. This is what everyone says they want, but even this is not enough to placate conspiracy theorists. Since at least 1970, the UK has been below average on healthcare investment compared to other advanced countries, except for 2 years under the last Labour government. Yet, when Labour was investing in the health service at the highest rate in its history, they still had to roll out PR managers to make it very clear to the media that they were not secretly privatising the NHS. Because they weren't. Do you know what the absolute worst part about this is? We already spend more on healthcare out of our own pockets than Americans. The NHS is in such a state that switching to the American system would probably be an improvement.
Wow, that is sad. Crime. Just how bad is crime? Legal. Just like the United States and California and other liberal states. Crime is legal.
Fought between the world's elite businessmen.
You know what? Honestly, the more I watch this video, the more I realize the UK could become the United States' 51st state. And you probably wouldn't really notice any difference, because they're the same. They have the same problems. But the UK is even worse. Somehow.
The battlefield is London, and you, the British taxpayer, are paying for them to exploit the legal system for their own gain. At the same time, money is being siphoned off from the police and court system to fund
Can't you also
these
be
exploits,
thrown in
rendering
prison
crime
for
effectively
mean
legal
comments
in the
online
UK.
now?
Private
I think you can be arrested
prosecutions
for in
are
Britain.
an archaic legal procedure invented sometime in the Middle Ages. Prior to the introduction of the modern court system in the 19th century, if you wanted to bring someone to justice, the only way to get it was to pay for it yourself. Get permission from the government, hire some lawyers and a judge, rent out a courtroom,
I'm guessing
recruit
it's the
some
same
jurors,
now.
and run the trial yourself. And legally, this is a legitimate court that can find someone innocent or guilty and put them in prison. In the past, this has allowed the common man to obtain justice if the Crown Courts refused to hear the case. In 2017, it was used to put a Russian millionaire behind bars for defrauding £1 million from an investor. In principle, it's a good idea. Okay, but here's the twist. Unlike a regular trial where both parties cover their own legal fees, in a private prosecution, the government funds all of your legal fees, but not the fees of your opponent. What a perfectly balanced game with no possible exploits. When coalition budget cuts prevented the legal system from functioning properly, many of London's wealthiest and most corrupt businessmen instead turned to private prosecutions. They started accusing their rivals of stealing millions of pounds or breaking contracts on a technicality. If you win the case, you can send your opponent to jail or give them an unlimited fine. Even if you expect to lose the case, that's also a-okay, because you can drag out the trial until your opponent goes bankrupt. And the British taxpayer pays for you to do it.
Oh my god!
It's a no-risk bet. Anyway, the cost of giving free taxpayer money to billionaires to sue each other into oblivion has completely wiped out all of the savings made from budget cuts to the police and court systems since 2010. Oh well, I guess we'll just have to tax disabled people some more to make up for it. If you commit a crime in Britain today, there is at least a 95% chance you will get away with it. And that's not me being hyperbolic. Look at the rate of reported crimes that end in a criminal charge. Assault, 5%. Stalking, 5%. Harassment, 4%. Burglary, 4%.
How?
Criminal damage, 4%. Vandalism, 3%. Vehicle theft, 2%. Muggings and pickpocketing, 1%. 248 phones are stolen in London every day, and only 2% of them are ever recovered. Most police don't even investigate stolen phones, even though there are trackers in every phone to tell the police exactly where the stolen phones are located. The crimes with the highest charge rates are...
And I'm guessing if you take justice into your own hands, you'll be arrested for it.
Shoplifting at 14%, which is frankly amazing considering nearly 3 in 4 reported lootings by criminal gangs don't even get a police response, and cannabis possession at 15%. Evidently, police think smoking a joint and watching videos of baby pandas is a bigger threat to public safety than stalking or burglary. If the police won't protect us, and we can't own guns for self-defense, you would think the party of personal responsibility would at least legalize pepper spray. Sadly, even the mildest pepper spray is considered a weapon,
pepper spray is illegal.
And you can be arrested for carrying it. Meanwhile, cops have been
oh my god. This hurts my brain. I'm losing brain cells. I can feel them dying off the more I watch this video.
Told to not bother arresting actual, real, genuine criminals, instead sending them away with a warning. People like you and me, average people who only commit minor crimes like movie piracy and cannabis smoking, get the full weight of the law upon us, while blatant criminals can do whatever they want.
I'm not 100% sure about this, but I'm pretty sure you can get arrested for writing mean comments online. If you call someone a bitch on the internet, you can get arrested in the United Kingdom. I think that's true. I'll check after I finish watching this video if that's actually true or not.
Like it's the purge. Theft at knife point is basically legal, but a tower that doesn't look exactly like the brochure is prohibited and has to be demolished.
Being a lawyer is a tough job with long hours.
This really is the
and low
purge.
pay, but 25% of barristers have quit their job since 2017, and a further 25% say that they plan to. I would too if I was paid on average £12,000 a year. I think that's a typo. Let me check. It turns out it's true. It is actually £12,000 a year. The National Crime Agency loses 10% of its...
£12,000 a year. You can't live with that type of money. That's worse than the minimum wage here in Poland is.
Workforce every year due to quitting. Probably because their officers earn 14% less than a regular beat bobby on the street.
Where do these barristers and special agents go? To the private law sector, where they get straight to work making 4 times the salary in private prosecutions, defrauding the taxpayer. By paying barristers poverty wages, the Tories have handed over our best lawyers to the hands of gangsters and foreign billionaires who exploit our legal system for money. So if the cops aren't preventing crimes, solving crimes, capturing criminals, or bringing people to trial, what are they doing? They're beating up people who were hosting a memorial service for a woman who was murdered by an off-duty police officer. I was sitting on a jury a few years ago, and in the waiting room, the woman sitting in front of me was chatting away to the person next to her about how human rights are overrated and how it's harder to bring criminals to justice because of human rights. And this woman isn't in the minority. I think most people have an internal conscience that makes them act ethically, like Jiminy Cricket from Pinocchio, but for a lot of British people, that conscience is Joseph Stalin. On almost every civil liberties issue you can name, opinion polls show that just over half of the British public will always pick the anti-freedom option. The death penalty, mandatory identity cards, monitoring all public spaces with CCTV 24 hours a day, detaining suspected criminals indefinitely without trial, warrantless wiretapping of innocent people's phones and text messages, keeping a record of every citizen's fingerprints even if they haven't done anything wrong. At some point it just gets ridiculous. 10 years in jail for travellers avoiding COVID quarantine. They've got no problem with police brutality either. It's this slim majority that allows the government to pass a whole host of authoritarian laws and get away with it. We used to be quite good at this, you know?
Leave the country. It's done.
The birthplace of...
I can understand why the Scottish want independence now. Cause holy shit, if the Scottish get independence, they can technically get rid of all this bullshit, right? And they can start their own country, which isn't whatever the hell Great Britain is trying to be.
Liberalism,
I would not want to be stuck in this place.
Englishmen and all that. The problem is that the law works in precedence. Laying one brick doesn't do much, but it affects every other brick that comes on top of it. And this time, it was Labour who started building this wall to imprison us under the guise of safety. In the early 2000s, the Blair government passed a number of laws giving authorities the powers to do pretty much anything if they think it will prevent attacks from terriers. These laws have been used to detain a man for carrying a laptop and wearing a coat that was a bit too warm for the season, arrest a woman walking on a cycle path, arrest a man taking photographs of a disused road, spy on people that local councils suspected weren't picking up after their dog, and the Metropolitan Police used these powers to manhandle an autistic teenager for calling a police officer a lesbian. I'm sure they stopped a few.
I don't think I even need to keep watching this video. Honestly, if you're in Britain, what the hell are you doing? Get out! Get out of that shithole.
Actual criminals with it too. Under these powers, hundreds of thousands of people, disproportionately black, are subject to invasive searches by police every year. Searches that, by the government's own analysis, don't reduce crime. When stop searches were dramatically increased in 10 London boroughs, it had no effect on the overall crime rate in these areas.
Of course it wouldn't.
But this isn't as clear-cut as you'd think. There is some conflicting evidence. An independent analysis based on the whole UK over a 10-year period found that increasing stop searches by 10% led to a 0.01 reduction in violent crime. The most precious freedom of all is freedom of speech, but there is no freedom of speech in Britain. I mean, sure, the Human Rights Act says everyone has the right to freedom of expression.
No, they don't.
But then it is immediately followed up by the exercise of these freedoms may be subject to such formalities, conditions, and restrictions or penalties as are prescribed by law.
Yeah, so there's no actual freedom
Labour
of speech.
used this exception to make it illegal to say offensive things over the internet. A crime.
Yes, that's exactly what I said before. I was correct, I wasn't wrong. You can get arrested for calling someone a bitch online. Man, I don't think anyone in Britain plays Call of Duty anymore, because if they do, they're going to prison for the rest of their lives.
Which we are all probably guilty, particularly me when I was 14 years old.
Quite literally every single person would be guilty.
This law has been used to prosecute a woman posting rap lyrics, some old men posting boomer memes in a private group chat, and a 20-year-old man who insulted a police officer. Look away if you're easily offended. This is really offensive and definitely worthy of a criminal conviction. Ready? Okay. He posted this.
Oh,
and of course,
no!
worth mentioning that a conviction for posting an edgy video online launched the career of Count Stankula of the Mum's Basement Independence Party. So, up yours, Tony.
Now on their own, that's not so bad. I mean, sure, there are a few false arrests, but all of these people were either never charged or had their convictions overturned on appeal. And surely that's worth it to keep us safe from crime and stop bigots ruining everyone's day. What's the worst that could happen?
The Conservatives have built on these precedents to implement the most intrusive and wide-reaching surveillance laws ever passed in a democracy, giving a multitude of police and government organisations the power to silence dissent and investigate people without a warrant. Why did you give the Food Standards Agency the power to hack my phone for whatever reason and then be able to lie about it in court? Is my cooking really that bad? Just seems a little...
Britain is starting to sound like China. Cameras everywhere, complete censorship, zero freedom of speech. Yeah, it really is just an authoritarian country now. This place
strange
sucks.
to me that the party that supposedly hates cancel culture and supports free speech, when given an opportunity to repeal these laws, just makes them worse by trying to ban legal but harmful online speech, by giving police power to shut down demonstrations, to impose location restrictions, noise restrictions, jailing protesters for holding onto things, and detaining anyone in the vicinity of a protest even if they weren't participating, by giving police power to arrest
oh my god. At this point, I'm saying just let Britain tear itself apart, let it destroy itself, burn itself to the ground, then bring in new people who have common sense and logic, and start again from the ground up. Because there is no solution to this, other than completely destroying it and starting anew.
Protesters for being a nuisance. Do you even know what a protest is? We're building a country where the government can introduce a whole host of policies meant to curb the freedom of transgender people, but a tweet in support of these policies gets you arrested? No word of opposition from the opposition either. They supported these laws. Labour are just as authoritarian as the Tories. They just want better funding for public transport. I know it's kind of unpopular in left and liberal circles to stand up for freedom of speech, considering the movement has been co-opted by boneheads waving flags. Wait, what the hell is this guy doing? But if you don't stand up for freedom of speech, even the freedom of unsympathetic idiots, then the same laws will one day be used against you and the causes you support.
Okay, this I agree with. This is good.
See how
France
French
did good
police
here.
have the
For
power
once.
to outright ban all protests in support of Palestine under the guise of anti-racism.
No, that's a good thing, though.
If we don't put a stop to this illiberal nonsense.
Before you know it, we're living in some kind of dystopian society where the government could put you in jail for publishing information that makes them look bad.
Ah, nice. Fun police.
The UK has some of the most restrictive laws on what you can eat, drink or smoke out of any European country. And that's because of public health advocacy
Eat and drink?
groups. It started in 2007 with the smoking ban. Now everyone agrees smoking is bad and should be discouraged, but the ban on smoking was far stricter than bans in most other countries. We could have been more like Germany or Austria or Sweden, where pubs could choose if they wanted a smoking room. Not in Soviet Britain. Smoking in all establishments was banned.
Yeah, it is basically Soviet.
It melted our brains and changed the way Brits think about what the government should even be allowed to do in regards to our personal lives. Now, to be clear, I don't care about smokers. Your choices are stupid and enjoy your lung cancer. But
Agreed.
I know that how the state treats smokers is the canary in a coal mine for how it will treat other unhealthy things that the rest of us can actually enjoy in moderation in ways that don't hurt other people. Because from this came banning cat, spice and nos, banning buy one get one free offers, banning chocolate near checkouts, banning flavoured vapes, banning disposable vapes, banning big wine glasses, taxes on sugar, taxes on alcohol. The Welsh government want to ban meal deals. A cross-party committee of MPs has recommended banning microwave dinners. Another campaign wants to ban
Let's just
fast
ban food in
within
general.
a 5-minute radius of schools. Some campaigners even propose putting a cap on the amount of sugar the country can import. You know who else wanted to stop the British importing sugar? The Nazis. None of this nonsense would be seriously considered if the smoking ban was not so harsh. The proponents of the smoking ban assured everyone that this would be the limit of government regulation. They didn't want to ban smoking, just restrict it to private residences. They lied. The incessant campaigning of big public health means a total ban on smoking is scheduled for next year, the only country in the world that is doing this. So if these paternalists say they don't want to ban takeaways or alcohol or coke or birthday cake
Why
or
are they
chewing
doing
gum, they are lying. That's what they've been working towards. They don't think people should be allowed to make the choice to do something unhealthy. Who doesn't love a greasy kebab after a night on the town? Who doesn't see the value in a refreshing pint on a summer afternoon? These guys. If they had their way, all of these things will be banned.
And there's no practical justification. They claim it is to reduce pressure on the NHS because of obesity and other related illnesses, but the biggest pressure on the NHS isn't obesity, it's old people being old. And now we have a drug that cures obesity. These laws aren't necessary anymore. If you become morbidly Mr. Beast, just take the injection.
You might say, this is all an overreaction. Why am I dying on this hill defending Coca-Cola and Tesco Caterpillar cake? Because it's just one of the many death by 1,000 cuts that is making Britain a more boring place to live. Ditching Wi-Fi on trains because it is unaffordable, your local swimming pool removing the water slides due to budget constraints, closing museum exhibits, changing the inside of passports to remove the ships and trains and other British achievements for boring geometric shapes. Once you see this, you can't unsee it. A nation of nothing.
It can't be done!
This is just depressing.
You hadn't a chance, there isn't a possible way. The chains will bend, the girders snap, the thing will blow away. What's more, we can't afford the price, it's rather high, you see. And he replied, it's great, you fools, and I am IKB.
This decade is an era of both crisis and prosperity. We live on the verge of quantum computers, nuclear fusion, DNA editing, life extension, Mars missions, and vaccines for cancer that will hugely improve our quality of life. But we will also enter a world of hyper-realistic AI video, robotic warfare, huge shifts in culture driven by faceless algorithms, and where anyone with $15,000 and a biology degree can print the next bubonic plague. An emerging China rivals the United States. An aggressive Russia threatens Europe. They have big plans for
Russia's not really much of a threat. If it wasn't for the fact they have nukes, nobody would take them seriously. Because they're not someone to take seriously. They're pathetic, other than the fact they have nukes. If Russia did not have nukes, the military support from the West for Ukraine would be 10 times higher, and the war would have already been over. I can guarantee that. But no, Putin has these red lines, and every time it gets crossed he just draws a new one, and it's just an endless cycle because he's never actually gonna use nukes.
Plans that are in opposition to Western liberal democracies.
The first and foremost point of a government at its very core is
the
to
UK might join them. They're pretty much the same.
Threats. This weakened country will fail to do so if we're not prepared. And we're not prepared. It is entirely possible to build a modern, functional and prosperous state outside of the European Union. Take a look at Norway or Switzerland. But it does require a lot of effort and a lot of big thinking. It's a do or die project, and our politicians of all colours have chosen die. British politics is so petty and small-minded that it even has a name: managed decline. At best, this is just tweaking small bits at a time to gently guide the ship of state onto the ocean floor. I mean, can you really imagine Vladimir Putin or Emmanuel Macron giving a public address to celebrate banning phones in schools?
One of the biggest issues
Fuck. This should be the work of a low-level cabinet minister, not the leader of a country with nuclear weapons. And at worst, it's intentionally ruining the few remaining strengths of the UK. Heathrow Airport is the busiest airport in all of Europe, an important centre for European tourism and transit. But building a third runway? Impossible. God damn it, it's the Town and Country Planning Act again, isn't it? While other hot tourist destinations let visitors shop tax-free to encourage tourism, the UK hits them with a 20% tax on 20%? All purchases.
Oh my God.
The Premier League is the most valuable...
There was a point where I wanted to go to the UK. Screw that, I'm never going there. That country sucks.
...football league in the world. The Conservatives have sabotaged this by introducing a pointless regulator that does all the same things as the Premier's own internal regulator and turns football from a fucking game into a political issue. So now politicians are going to be interviewed about...
Football has kind of always been a bit of a political issue. Because that's just how football is.
The rulings of football games than the actual issues of the day. Britain has been a free-trading, seafaring, buccaneering nation for centuries. In a world where power and influence are won more with container ships than at the barrel of a gun, if Britannia is to assert herself in this changing world, she must relearn to rule the waves. That means building ports up and down the country, expanding the navy, securing more trade agreements, because wouldn't it be awesome if we could walk into any supermarket and be faced with an overwhelming choice of produce from every country in the world? Unfortunately, the UK...
But they're banning certain produce, or at least planning to. He said that in an earlier section.
His largest port is in a sleepy coastal town 2 hours away from London. The proposed expansion of Felixstowe took 19 years to get approval because of the Town and Country Planning Act.
Approval?
In the same time, our great
geopolitical
rival China, which the Tories love to talk about how seriously they're taking it, have more than doubled the number of ports under their control, either by building their own or buying terminals in over 50 countries. There are currently 0 plans to expand British port capabilities. For £18,000 you can give up a year of your life, 24 hours a day in service of His Majesty's Navy, being sent halfway across the planet from your friends and family to fight pirates. Or you can stack shelves at Tesco for a few days a week. I know which one I would choose. The Royal Navy has been so underfunded and soldiers so underpaid that there is now a shortage of troops. 2 ships have been retired due to lack of staff, and the government is now resorting to LinkedIn for retired rear admirals to command vessels. Within 10 years, the UK will retired rear admirals to command vessels. Within 10 years, the UK will become the only advanced country without the facilities to make steel from raw materials. We are shutting down all the blast furnaces. So if there is a war, like right now, and we need submarines and ships to defend ourselves,
you're not getting any.
Like right now, where are we going to get the steel from, Rishi? Will I have to pull shopping trolleys out of my local river to make aircraft carriers with? Oxford and Cambridge are still an engine of innovation and scientific achievements. Their universities remain 2 of the best universities in the world, and the UK takes the silver medal when foreign students are asked where they'd most like to study. Right in between them is Milton Keynes, a major high-tech manufacturing hub. Many countries would kill for an arrangement like this, yet Britain's small-minded thinking is squandering that gift. British neuroscientists and quantum computers are paid as little as $50,000 per year. Astronauts with a PhD, fluent in Russian and with dual US citizenship, paid a mere $40,000. Engineers in the United States are paid double what they are in Britain. In 2017, a single computer virus took down the entire NHS overnight. How will it survive an AI virus that learns its own weaknesses and patches them up as it proliferates? How would our energy infrastructure cope with a huge cyber attack of the kind inflicted on Ukraine during this war? The answer is that it wouldn't.
They couldn't cope with it.
Because it can't. Housing Secretary Michael Gove, a man who makes me ashamed to be a Michael, finally did something in his 14-year career of making things worse and proposed doubling the size of Cambridge by building 150,000 new homes around the city. This would, in theory, double the output of the city and double the amount of scientific achievement. And maybe then we can finally catch up with the USA and Germany and China and be more than just a collection of hedge funds with a Bulgaria stapled to it. The local Member of Parliament, Conservative by the way, objected to this proposal of more scientific advancement and free investment money on the grounds that Cambridge didn't have the reservoir capacity to supply drinking water to all the new residents that would move there. So let's talk about the reservoirs. Can we talk about the reservoirs, Mac? I've been dying to talk about the reservoirs. From 1970 to 1980, Britain built 10 new...
What is the plan here? These politicians are single-handedly destroying the entire country. And they know it. They have to know it. They have all the data. They see what's happening. What's the purpose? What's their plan? Do they have a plan? Or are they really just oblivious idiots? At this point, I would go as far as to say that these are all foreign agents who are being paid by an enemy of Britain so that they can destroy the country from the inside. That's stupid and a total conspiracy theory. It makes me sound like a lunatic. But at this point, I would believe that that's actually the case. Because I have no other explanation for why someone would destroy their own country willingly, like this.
Reservoirs. That's one per year. Since 1992, Britain has built 0 reservoirs. Yet the population has gone up by 10 million people. To build a new water reservoir, the MP said, would take up to 20 years. 20 years to dig a hole in the ground and wait for it to rain. On an island where it does nothing except rain. So we can't have a super futuristic technology hub, we can't build smartphones, we can't program robots or build supersonic jets, or even build enough houses so that people have somewhere to live. Oh, don't bother creating a better society, guys, because we're too lazy to build a reservoir. We're rationing water now in a supposed first world country. But it's okay, because Rishi Sunak has unveiled he's spending £1 million on 100 new chess sets in parks up and down the country.
What is the point?
Nowhere has this utter failure. Sorry, 100 chess sets. That's it. That's your latest, greatest policy on how to fix the country. 100 chess... No, it's actually 100 chess boards. They're not even going to give us the pieces. Can't you at least give us the knights? You seem to have a lot of them, considering how many f***ing L's this government keeps taking. Nowhere has this utter failure to become a modern country been more evident in the fight around HS2, the most rudimentary of 21st century transport that we just can't seem to get right. The actual building of the track is actually proceeding on time and on budget. It's just getting to that stage that costs so much. Every mile of track is ferociously debated, discussed, subject to committee meetings, costing analysis, public scrutiny, local hearings and objections from environmentalist groups, hugely ballooning the cost. After 15 years under construction, the 140 miles of railway line is set to be completed by 2045.
45? 45? That's 21 years. 21 fucking years. This is all good though. In a way this is good because other countries can look at Britain and realize what not to do. Whatever the British are doing, don't do it, because it's a guaranteed way to destroy your country and fail.
21 years until I can hop on HS2 and visit the newly opened Cambridge Reservoir. Even by the time the project comes to fruition, we will still have less high-speed rail than Romania, Greece and Serbia. The government could write a law tomorrow that fixes all of this. If they really did care about making a success of Brexit, if they really were serious about governing the country, there would be an all-out mobilisation of every aspect of government to make Britain into a country fit for the 21st century. But they won't.
They want to go back to the 20th century.
Okay, look. I don't care if it costs £1 trillion. I don't care if it makes 1,000 species of rare squirrel extinct. HS2 has to be built as a matter of principle, because if it doesn't, it is over for large structural change in this country. Whether you're on the left or the right, whether you want to reopen the steel factories or build a fleet of aircraft carriers or 100 nuclear power plants, we can't do it. If we can't do what Spain or France or China has done 10 times since the 1990s, we can't do anything. We will be stuck debating infantile politics, arguing about bin collections and potholes and whatever the hell wokeness is forever.
I think it's already too late.
Than this.
But for a lot of Brexiteers, maybe the most devoted 40% of them, that's totally fine for them. They proudly don't mind being poorer. They aren't bothered about building a powerful economy or having any influence on the world stage. They would gladly put up with any decline in their living standards, but so long as the government did one thing: bring down immigration. And the government didn't do it.
They failed completely.
And the government didn't do it.
One job.
Oh, I really don't want to talk about this. Immigrants didn't elect this corrupt government. Immigrants didn't brutalise the poor or take away our freedoms. Immigrants didn't prevent us from building infrastructure. We did all that to ourselves. But lucky for the pro-immigration side, the anti-immigration side is utterly incompetent. In 2010, the Tories promised to get the number of immigrants below 100,000 per year. In 2022, it was over 700,000. Nice one. Migrants are being housed in hotels, country clubs, private lettings, or just dumping them on the streets of London. This is for an immigration system that...
Hey, they have a housing crisis. They don't have enough homes. 700,000 immigrants. Where are they supposed to live? Why would immigrants even go to the UK? The situation there is atrocious. Oh shit, now that I think about it. If the situation there is so bad, and if the situation also gets bad in Western Europe, they're gonna start coming to Poland. They're gonna start coming here. Thank God my country is anti-immigration. And we have a fence on the border to keep them out. At least the ones in Belarus. However, we do still have a bit of an immigration problem here, which should be addressed. Those immigrants should be shipped out of the fucking country. I somewhat have to agree with Trump on that. We've seen what immigrants have done in Sweden. We don't want them here. Not just Sweden, the rest of Europe as well. But just take a look at Sweden and immigrants there. We don't want that to be our country.
It is half as busy as it was 20 years ago. Now there's this conspiracy theory that the Tories are secretly left-wing and this is all a master plan to destroy the country with immigrants because of wokeness, but the real answer is that the Tories are definitely right-wing and definitely anti-immigration. They're just stupid motherfuckers. When France offered to build a migrant processing facility in Calais for the UK, operated by British workers, the Conservatives said no.
Build it completely free of charge, offered jobs for the British, and they still said no. I don't get it.
Instead, the Tories sent £9 million of taxpayer money to Albania to improve the country and stop people wanting to leave. The money will be spent on a huge new hydroelectric dam, industrial parks, environmental schemes and leisure facilities.
Why not build that in the UK?
By the way, to facilities for Albanians. By the way, 213,000 children in the UK could be living with lead poisoning because of faulty plumbing in over 100 schools. Not enough money to fix that though, obviously. How do they get away
but give it to Albania.
The pro-immigration side of the debate are so bad at arguing their case. They often avoid very real concerns people might have about immigration with dismissive, twee-sounding memes.
I think you'll find that fish and chips are actually Portuguese, your car is German, and your coffee is Italian. I'll have you know my wife is French and she's lovely.
Are you stupid? Racists aren't worried about French women, they're worried about tens of thousands of young men from some of the poorest countries in the world.
Pretty hypocritical of the British to spend 200 years colonizing the world and then complain about foreigners in your country?
Jesus Christ, we're trying to make immigrants look good, not compare them to the fucking Amritsar massacre. Most people lie somewhere in the middle. They want more high-skilled and educated immigration, but lower levels of other forms of migration. That's fair, but whether you want a liberal or restrictive immigration system, you can't have it if there isn't a system at all.
Was the
2010 to 2024 Conservative government will go down in history as the worst British government since the Irish famine of the 1840s. Because unlike, say, the Thatcher government, who at the very least had an ideological motive, the current government have not and have never had any reason behind what they are doing. They've just been winging it this whole time.
Wait, hold on. This guy lives in Britain, right? Isn't he gonna get arrested for this? Because this is anti-government? Well, shit.
Many on the left would be shocked by how apolitical most of the Conservative Party is. There is currently no theory in Conservative politics. One former MP once told me that when he asked his association why they had picked him for a safe seat, he was told, "It was the lovely way you spoke about your wife at the selection." Many MPs come to Parliament without any real belief other than a view that good things are good and we should do more of them, and bad things are bad.
All that they do isn't because of some kind of deep-seated ideological belief. It's because they're bored.
Now, I don't want to be a complete and utter killjoy, but I've just run the gauntlet here at Tesco's in Haslingden with my kids, past all the discounted toys, only to see that the Easter Bunny is already on the shelf. Easter, 31st of March this year. Let me know in the comments below whether you think Easter is coming to our supermarkets and shops too early.
In 1914, at age 22, Harold
utter
Macmillan dropped
joke.
out of Oxford University to command a troop of working-class men on the front lines of France. He was shot twice and played dead in a shell hole for 12 hours, reading a pocketbook of ancient Greek while he waited for help. The upper-class Anthony Eden earned himself a military cross at the Somme for carrying a wounded soldier to safety under heavy German fire. It's no surprise that when these men later became Conservative Prime Ministers in the 1950s, they presided over social democratic Britain, where taxes on the rich were high, social security was generous, and the gap between rich and poor was at its smallest in our nation's history. At age 22, Boris Johnson, David Cameron, Michael Gove and the rest of the Tory leadership were finishing up at Oxford University. They've never had to interact with the povos, they've never set foot out of the timeless country villages into the brutalist post-industrial nothingscape that most of us live in. They grew up attending fancy private schools, learning about how their ancestors rode gallantly into battle, administered whole provinces of India by themselves, or guided the empire to victory in a world war. They probably felt like they were missing all the fun. That's what Brexit was about. It wasn't about building a strong sovereign Britain outside of the EU, or else they would have done that. Or at least tried to. It was about getting their photograph in a history textbook alongside their great-grandpa. And then, well, that's your legacy secured, really. Everything else is just killing time.
Well, he'll always be known as a massive moron.
Engaging in corruption.
Not
Take,
the
for
type
example,
of
Rishi Sunak, a
legacy I
millionaire
want.
so out of touch that he asks a homeless man if he works in business, whose wife is richer than the king and owns £700 million worth of shares in her father's company Infosys, that refuses to stop paying taxes in Russia and is close businesses with oil giants BP and Shell. Infosys worked on blockchain technology with Alpha Bank, a Russian bank formerly run by Tory member Alexander Knasta. Until it was sanctioned in March 2022, the bank worked for the Russian government. The former Deputy Finance Minister of Russia is married to a Tory member, who paid almost £300,000 for private meetings with Liz Truss and Boris Johnson. Boris received £27,000 worth of discount luxury food from a company owned by...
You know what I said about these people being paid by foreign governments? Maybe I wasn't wrong. Maybe that conspiracy theory that I made up was completely correct.
The wife of a Tory lord. That Tory lord is the owner of JCB, which David Cameron's government spent £700 million of taxpayer money advertising abroad. In 2013, David Cameron received a donation of £177,000 from the Russian PR company New Century Media, a company that had previously worked with the Russian government to promote a positive image of Russia in the UK. That same year, David Cameron appointed Dido Harding, his friend he met at university, to the House of Lords.
Is that supposed to be a man or a woman? I can't tell.
Ew. Harding attends the same horse racing club in the town of former Secretary of Health Matt Hancock, who in 2020 appointed Harding as the head of the UK's COVID-19 testing system. The horse racing club was formerly controlled by Rose Patterson, the wife of Tory MP Owen Patterson, who was a consultant for the company Randox, who not only sponsors the jockey club, but was also given £500 million during the pandemic for testing and diagnostics. Hancock was eventually kicked out of his office for having an affair with intern Gina Coladangelo, who got the internship because her brother is the executive director of Partnering Health Limited, which was given a multi-million-pound contract for NHS Wales by who else but Rishi Sunak.
It's all connected.
It turns out that 20% of all contracts issued in the COVID-19 pandemic for protective equipment, $20 billion in total, were awarded to companies headed by Conservative Party members. And this doesn't even scratch the tip of the iceberg. How do they get away with it? Surely there must be some kind of anti-corruption department to keep track of all this, right? Well, there was actually a guy called the Anti-Corruption Champion, but he resigned from the job 2 years ago, and a successor was just never appointed. Also, he's a Tory MP. Also, he's married to Dido Harding. But would it all be so bad if this privately educated cabal of toffs were actually good at their job?
The MP accused of watching porn in the House of Commons.
He allegedly told a senior civil servant to slit your throat.
He is facing very serious allegations that he reportedly offered to lobby ministers on behalf of the gambling industry.
They have now made more than 100 referrals for fixed penalty notices as a result of those inquiries.
Does anyone ever say, you know what, you've done a good job because everyone else has sat on their and done nothing? No sign.
I have to say I was somewhat astonished by the speech of the shadow Home Secretary, who can't even get the name of the country right, talking about the Kigali government. We're talking about Rwanda. You know, respect a country.
The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom interviewing the richest man in the world, talking about AI in the context of the James Cameron Terminator films. I can barely believe I'm saying all of this.
During his trial, the former health secretary had to crawl through a tunnel while covered in sludge and bugs.
Mr Johnson compared himself to Moses. He also quoted Lenin.
Peppa Pig World is very much my kind of place. It has very safe streets.
I used to be embarrassed about my country's politicians. I'm starting to realize that my country's politicians are completely okay. They're sane, they're normal people. I'm no longer embarrassed about them because I realize just how much worse it could be. It could be like this. Luckily it isn't.
Forgive me.
No Country for Young Men?
Okay.
What exactly does that mean?
This video is slightly one-sided. So, in the interest of balance, we should at least let the Conservatives defend themselves. Judging by opinion polls, finding a genuine supporter of the current government is pretty unlikely. But there is a sect of disillusioned Conservatives who don't deny the problems we face, but suggest that the Tories are suffering from some kind of diminished responsibility. The argument goes something like, well, for the first 5 years it was the coalition with the Lib Dems, and we were recovering from a worldwide financial crisis that affected all countries, not just us. And then there was Brexit, which took up too much of the government's calendar to do anything else.
Scotland and Northern Ireland were against leaving the EU. They were against Brexit. Scotland really needs to get its independence and come back. Just leave England behind. They're lost. It's a shame they'll probably never get their independence. Sucks for the Scottish.
And then it was the pandemic, and now another global crisis that has hampered the Tories' ability to do what they really wanted. Oh, and the budget cuts didn't really do much anyway either. It's a productivity issue that started way before 2010. I think this is a pretty rotten excuse, because even if you agree that governments can't be held liable for things they didn't want to do because of unforeseen circumstances, it's a lie anyway. The Tories did want to do all this, because one demographic has consistently benefited from the Tories' rule, which convinces me that all these outcomes were a deliberate choice, not an accident. One demographic that have been immune from all the budget cuts and cruel assaults on our livelihoods.
Old people.
Old people. Specifically, wealthy old people. Since
so
2017,
people, just the rich
every
ones.
single age group has taken a hit to their household income, except people over 65, who have faced no loss of income whatsoever. In fact, quite the opposite. If you were born in Britain before 1973, congratulations, you win. Britain will enter her twilight years just as you enter yours. All the horrible things discussed in this video don't apply to you. Let's look at some of the ways Britain is disproportionately catered towards the...
That is the dumbest thing you could do. Catering towards old people is the stupidest decision ever. Because old people are not the future of the country. Young people are.
The interest of middle and upper class old people. Pensions are triple locked, each year the state pension grows by at least 2.5%, or to match the inflation rate, or the average national income, whichever is highest. And this is fine, but it's the only benefit that has this. And it's universal. The wealthy get free money just as much as the poor people who actually need it. The disabled, the unemployed, young carers, public sector employees and healthcare workers are all at the mercy of inflation and the generosity of the government to keep their payments above inflation. Most of the time they need to go on strike to get it. What this results in is pensioners having higher incomes than working age citizens for the first time in history.
That's how you know there's a fucking problem, when someone who sits on their ass all day and does nothing because they can't anymore gets paid more than people who actually work for the damn country.
Half of young people support the construction of HS2, with only 10% opposed. In the over 65, the support is flipped. Because you know the number one demographic that opposes building more housing and infrastructure? It's old people. It's always old people. 20% of nightclubs have closed permanently since 2020. Nightlife has been regulated out of existence. Oh, why is nobody having children these days? Probably because elderly middle-class people don't want you to get married, and they don't want you to own your own house, and they don't want your family to have any fun. It's not even like a
This problem might start solving itself with time, as these old people die. Because healthcare is not that great anymore in the UK, and these people are old. You know what old people do? They die. So maybe once these fuckers all die, things will get better. Maybe the Brits will have a decent country in like 100 years. Because they're not gonna recover from this quickly, even if all these old fucks die.
Massive dislike of young people. It's an active assault on their
I feel bad
livelihoods.
for the Brits.
Like trying
the
to ban
ones.
the under-25s from driving at night or carrying passengers in one of the safest countries in the world for road travel. Will this apply to the over-80s who cause just as many accidents? No? Didn't think so, you paternalist, freedom-hating pillock. Even down to the NHS algorithms that decide who deserves liver transplants. A Financial Times investigation found that older patients who are more likely to suffer from liver failure due to poor diet choices are almost always placed higher on the transplant list than younger patients who are suffering from liver failure because of serious, incurable genetic disease.
So the people who are useless for the country, because they no longer work, reap all the benefits. The people who the country needs to work to generate income for these old fucks who do nothing are being shafted constantly. It's kind of similar how my country was doing things.
Diseases. This algorithm, by the way, has no human input, cannot be overruled by physicians, and patients cannot appeal its decision. But what is most frustrating is how willfully oblivious old people can be towards the problems young people face. I'm going off script here because this makes my blood boil, but a nurse on poverty wages living a bare-bones existence to buy her first house in a rundown dump is not a heartwarming tale of hard work. Did any snobby telegraph writers have to give up seeing friends or eating out or having fun or pursuing their own goals in life just to afford their own home? No, they didn't. Did they have to move to an unproductive, impoverished area created by the very policies that their newspapers endorse and live with their family until they were 27 just to afford a house? No, they didn't. What about mortgage payments? We had mortgage payments that made your eyes water. Yeah, but it didn't have any effect because until 2000 they were tax deductible. I have to pay 9% of my income on student loans. You never did, because you went to university for free. It was free until 1988.
Oh, yeah.
And, but if I point this out, I'm just an entitled woke snowflake. Have some f***ing perspective. In response to people being unable to afford food, Tory MP Brendan Clark-Smith said,
say the price has shot up at that and people say, oh, this tin has gone up by 50% or whatever, buy the Tesco value one.
In response to the epidemic of raw sewage being dumped across the country, Tory MP Damien Green said,
I mean, I remember as a child in South Wales...
Swimming in sewage?
Swimming in sewage, absolutely. Oh, yeah. Jackson's Bay in Barry used to be a sewage outlet where we all went and paddled and swam.
Going back to the 1950s, you can see how Tory campaign posters promised less tax, More sugar, they say. A better future is possible. Today, the Tory message to the public is this: eat gruel and swim in shit. After 14 years in power, this is the best we can give you.
And people vote
and
for this.
And they make no attempt at hiding how they want to boost the power of old people.
Yeah, all these are old fucks.
Young people. In 2022, ID at polling stations was made mandatory for the first time in British history.
Another fine example of the erosion of the high trust society under the Tories.
But the forms of ID that are considered valid to vote with are nakedly tilted against young people, poor people and working families. Rent books, 18+ Oyster cards and student ID do not count, but 60+ Oyster cards do. Thankfully, this tactic didn't work because elderly Conservatives naturally forgot to bring ID, but Tories made no attempt at hiding their intentions and are completely unrepentant about having ruined a perfectly fine system.
As, dare I say, we found by insisting on voter ID for elections, and we found that the people who didn't have ID were elderly, and they by and large voted Conservative. So we made it hard for our own voters, and we upset a system that worked perfectly well, was one of the glories of our country, actually, that we did on an honesty basis.
Older generations are more likely to support the reintroduction of
straight up
national
admit
service,
everything.
Conscription in the army. Conveniently, now that they're all too old to be conscripted themselves, some military leaders are suggesting troop numbers need to quadruple in order to be able to fight in the event of a confrontation with Russia.
Good luck finding those people. We all know damn well, the moment any war breaks out, every single young man is gonna leave Britain. Because they're not gonna fight for that country. Hell no.
This was around the same time a poll came
Unless
out
they're
that said
delusional.
40% of young Brits would dodge conscription if a war did break out, and I don't blame them. Liberty, prosperity, opportunity, these are things worth fighting for, and modern Britain offers
isn't.
None of them. We would be fighting for gruel and 100 chess sets.
Honestly, Russia can take the UK. There's no benefits to having that place.
Chess tables. House of Commons leader Penny Mordaunt recently spoke out in favour of a kind of national service that wouldn't be military-based, but where all 16-year-olds would be automatically signed up to complete a set number of volunteering hours per year. She claimed it would harness young people's goodwill and community spirit. We all know what that would really look like. Young people spending a year of their life cleaning up dog poo, picking up litter, washing cars for free because there isn't enough money to pay actual workers to do the job. The Telegraph recently ran an article about the growing size of Britain's welfare state, and they included a handy calculator to let you know how much of your taxes goes towards benefit scroungers and single mums leeching off society. And it turns out most of my taxes go towards subsidising old people who hate me.
Awesome, isn't
Napoleon Bonaparte is quoted as saying, "To understand the man, you have to know what was happening in the world when he was 20. Well, when I was 20, the pandemic hit. I gave up 2 years of my life to protect the elderly from a disease that was basically harmless to me, but deadly for them. Your early 20s are the most important years for shaping the trajectory of your life, and
Early
I had
20s.
to waste them.
So that starts for me in July.
I didn't get my final 2 years at university, at least not the real university experience. I didn't get to develop professional skills. I was in the middle of an internship in March 2020. So what did they reward us young people with for our valiant sacrifice? More
Nothing.
taxes, high rent, high student loan interest, no fun, no help from the state, shutting down everywhere interesting, while the older generations get a tax cut. While the elderly Conservatives get to live in a museum that is neither well preserved nor educational, oblivious to how the 90% really live. We do not live in a country, we live in a retirement home. The Conservatives did this. They have had 14 years in power, 9 years with unchecked power. They turned a country that wasn't perfect but was doing pretty well for itself into an international joke. For no reason, for no ideological goal in mind. What do the Tories stand for? Sound economics? Limited government, law and order, controlled borders, defending the
None
union,
of they stand for none of
cultural
these things.
conservatism. No.
It's like what I was saying earlier. What is the goal? They have no plans, nothing.
Just a herd of brainless, directionless cattle, milling around, reacting slowly, leisurely strolling from one crisis to another.
The way I see it, the country isn't doing very well. No, it's doing very poorly, in fact.
I don't know how to fix all this. If you think electoral politics will save us, then go out there and campaign. That's good for you. If you want to emigrate, I don't blame you. If you think the whole thing should just be burned to the ground, just wait, and Parliament will just burn down by itself. But if I had to give you one instruction, the bare minimum towards fixing the sorry state of this country is that you walk into that polling booth on the 4th of July and you tick the box for whichever candidate will beat your local Conservative. If you have to hold your nose while you vote for a Labour samurai of bureaucracy, or a shit-eating Liberal Democrat, or an illiterate National Party stooge, that's fine. Because I promise you that no matter who gets elected, they will not be any worse than the fascist gangsters of the Conservative Party. A change in government won't turn this country around. What, you think Labour are going to reverse this? It will only buy us more time. But it is the first, smallest and most important step towards building a better Britain. Even if that step is taken, there is a lot of work to be done.
This video came out on June 3rd, 2024. So, he made this a month before the election. The election has already happened. However, I don't know the results because I wasn't interested in British politics, and I'm still not. Because it's not like anything is going to change the way this country is right now. It's not going to change for the next couple of decades. There's no way you can fix these horrible policies they have. Britain is lost.
Millions of houses, trillions spent on infrastructure, a country with more and more freedom each year, not less and less. If you're watching this long in the future, only you will know if we achieved this.
What more is there to say than Britain is a horrible country, and it's only gonna get worse, probably. And with that, I'm gonna end this video, because there's probably no one watching at this point anyway, so if you are one of the 5 people maybe still watching this at this point, subscribe if you enjoyed, leave a like. If you're interested, why not watch this video right here? And with that, I hope I'll see you in the next video.